slinging spells and controlling monsters larger than life. Hearthstone and all other popular collectible card games, or CCGs, owe their success, at least in part, to the popularity of Magic: The Gathering, which was one of the first, if not the first, major CCG when it was released in 1993. After consistently hosting a successful Pro Tour with physical cards since 1996, it's the digital version of the game, Magic: The Gathering Arena, that has card slingers from one end of the world to the other, eager to get involved in the game's online tournaments. For those who are not familiar with the fantasy card game, what is Magic: The Gathering, and how is it played? The two main formats are standard, where two players each have a deck of 60 cards made up of cards from the last 4 releases. And limited, where the two players need to build their 40 card decks from boosters they receive on the day of the tournament. The main card types that will be in those decks are permanents, which stay on the board until they're removed, including lands, which can be tapped to create mana, which players spend to cast spells. Lands can be played once per turn, unless you have another card on the board that says otherwise. Creatures can usually attack once per player's turn, or block during the opponent's turn if required. Enchantments come into play attached to either a creature or a player to help, harm, or provide extra abilities. Artifacts represent objects and pieces of equipment. They stick around on the board benefiting the player or get equipped to creatures. Unlike enchantments, they usually don't die when the creature they're equipped to does, and can be attached to other creatures if the player has sufficient mana. Lastly, there are planeswalkers, which have 3 abilities that either accrue or cost loyalty points. Although opponents can't choose which creatures they attack, they can say whether they're attacking you or your planeswalker, and then you choose which creatures block and how. There are also non-permanent spells which have an effect in that moment and then are placed in the player's graveyard. Instants can be played at any time during your or your opponent's turns. Sorceries can only be played during the main phases of your turn. All those card types come in 5 different colors with different property, and most players like to have 2 to 3 colors in their deck to complement each other. White is all about gaining life and focusing on order. Blue just wishes to control the board, more likely to stop others from playing things and force their opponent to run out of cards, rather than build up creatures. Black wants to take life at any cost, both yours and your opponent's. Red is another color that focuses more on temporary spells, choosing to burn your enemies rather than create an army. And finally, green is all about getting creatures, making more creatures, and generally amassing an army to overpower your enemies. Once you have your board set up with your hand of 7 cards, it's time to move on to the turn phases. It starts with your beginning, or untap phase, where you untap any card you used in your last turn and draw a card. Then there's the pre-combat main phase, where you can play a land or any other cards you might have sufficient mana for. After that comes combat, where you declare any attackers and your opponent can choose to block. You can also use instants here, which is followed by the post-combat main phase, so you can play permanents you didn't want to risk during combat. After the end step, it's your opponent's turn, and so on until one of your life totals, which usually starts at 20, goes down to 0 or below. While all that sounds relatively simple, most cards have text and abilities which complicate everything and cause the real fun to begin. That's why Magic: The Gathering is frequently compared to a poker-chess hybrid, but with more reading. With Wizards of the Coast offering glory and prize wins to players both new and old around the globe, now is the perfect time to become a planeswalker and stake your claim in this fantastic world. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with the amazing eSport content from around the gaming globe. Only on Unbeaten Esports.